Between one battlefield and the next, a young king becomes something the world had never seen. In the space between Issus and Gaugamela, Alexander is transformed. He honors the women of his beaten enemy like a knight from a later age. He is crowned pharaoh, installed as a god made flesh. In a lonely desert temple, an oracle names him the son of Zeus. Then he shatters the last great army of Persia and walks unresisted into the capital cities of the world. Everything a king could want falls into his hands. And yet the journey comes to rest in a strange, quiet place, not on a golden throne, but at a small tomb of plain stone, the grave of the man who first built the empire Alexander now owns. Return to the field at Issus, to the heaps of dead and wounded. Darius has fled, but the king's tent still stands. Inside waits an immense pavilion, water heated for the royal bath, wine, sweetmeats, a whole feast laid out. Alexander walks in with one of his generals, strips off his armor, and lowers himself into the bath drawn for Darius. Then he quotes a line from Herodotus. Herodotus had described an older scene on the field of Plataea in 479 BC. There, the Spartans, Athenians, and their allies broke the Persian army. Xerxes left behind, killed its general Macedonius, and seized his tent. Entering it, the Greek leader had said, "So this is what it is to be a king." Sinking into the tub, Alexander says the very same words. After the bath, Alexander goes with his closest friend, Hephaestion, into the women's quarters. Darius had traveled with his mother, his wife, an infant son, and 2 daughters, and abandons them all in flight. Alexander is short. Hephaestion is tall and strikingly handsome, so the queen mother bows low to Hephaestion, mistaking him for the king. Alexander only smiles. "It is all right, mother," he tells her. He too is Alexander. In that answer lives an older Macedonian spirit. Once these men fought as a band of brothers. The king was merely first among equals, and the royal house shared a rough equality with its nobles. That spirit still lingers here. Soon, it will vanish from Alexander entirely. Alexander treats Darius's women and the little son with what writers have called the utmost chivalry. He respects them, he calms their fears, he guards their privacy as if they were his own household. Set this against the cruelty other Greeks had shown. The Spartan king Agesilaus once stripped Persian captives naked in public to mock their soft, pale bodies before a jeering crowd. There is none of that here. No humiliation, no display. Instead, Alexander sends the royal women a promise. Soon they will live safely under his protection. A conqueror who has just butchered their army now shields the enemy's mother and children. It is the first sign of the king he means to become. Then a messenger reaches the Macedonian camp carrying a letter from Darius. The great king wants his family back, his mother, his wife, his children, and he makes an offer, the first of several to come. He will cede half his empire, every land from the Euphrates westward. He will give Alexander his daughter in marriage. Sealed together, they will rule as king. For a defeated king, still hunted, it is a staggering price to pay for peace. Half the known world handed over, and a royal bride to bind the bargain. Darius believes he is bargaining between equals, one king writing to another. He is about to learn that Alexander no longer sees it that way at all. Alexander answers with contempt. He has come to despise a man who would flee and leave behind not just an army, but his own wife and children. Darius, he says, has addressed him wrongly. Alexander is now lord of Asia, and no one writes to him as an equal. If Darius wants his family, let him come and beg for them in person. As for half the empire, there is nothing to give. It is already Alexander's, every acre of it. As for the daughter, Alexander will marry her if he pleases, with or without her father's consent. And one warning, do not run. Alexander will follow Darius to the ends of the earth. With that message, the herald is sent back into the dark. Now Alexander does something that has puzzled historians ever since. He has raced across the empire at breakneck speed. The obvious move is to chase Darius into the Persian heartland and destroy him before he can raise another army. Instead, Alexander turns aside. He decides to secure the whole coast behind him first, the Levant, Phoenicia, and Palestine, the shoreline of modern Lebanon and Israel, and then to take Egypt. He will leave no trouble in his rear. Word keeps arriving that Sparta is stirring, pushing out into the Aegean, even seizing the island of Crete, while broken Persian fleets still haunt the islands. But Alexander has come too far to turn back. His regent at home, Antipater, will have to deal with all of it. His first target is the Phoenician city of Tyre. To understand why Tyre matters, look at what these cities were. The Phoenicians were the greatest sailors of the ancient world. Their ships had rounded Africa as early as the 7th century BC. They planted colonies across the sea, Carthage and Utica on the North African coast. They sailed all the way to Britain to fetch tin, the metal alloyed with copper to make bronze, which every army and every craftsman needed. On this trade, Tyre, Sidon, and Byblos grew among the richest cities on earth. They also made the famous purple cloth, dyed from the murex shell, a color worth its weight in gold. This was the prize Alexander wanted under his hand. Sidon and the Byblos surrender at once. Tyre is different. Alexander sends word asking to enter and worship his ancestor Heracles at the city's temple. The Tyrians honor a god named Melkart, whom the Greeks matched with Heracles. But the Tyrians see through it, open the gates, and the worshipper becomes a conqueror who never leaves. They refuse. So Alexander settles in to break them, and Tyre, standing on an offshore island, holds him for 6 months. He tries everything: battering rams, siege engines mounted on ships, great moles of rock and sand pushed out from the shore toward the walls. One later story claims he descended in a glass diving bell to inspect the underwater defenses. Scholars once dismissed such tales as fantasy, but since the Antikythera device was revealed as the world's first computer, built only 2 centuries after Alexander, historians keep a more open mind. At last, Tyre falls. From the ruins of Tyre, Alexander marches down to Egypt, and there, at last, the warm welcome he had hoped for. For generations, the Egyptians had fought to be free of Persia, rebelling again and again, often with Greek soldiers at their side. Now a Greek, a Macedonian, arrives who can make their freedom last. They open their arms. They crown him pharaoh, founder of a new dynasty, and they hail him as a god. For every pharaoh was the god Horus made flesh on earth. Alexander already senses a cloud of divine power moving around him. This Egyptian worship does not surprise him. It confirms what he is beginning to believe. Then Alexander decides to go further, to seek the god himself. He turns west from the Nile into the Libyan desert, toward a lonely oasis where an oracle spoke for the god the Greeks called Zeus and the Egyptians called Ammon. The crossing is long and punishing, sand in every direction. At last he reaches the oasis and is led alone into the temple. There, in private with the god, or with the priests who speak for him, Alexander hears the words. The god claims him as his own son. Zeus himself had come to his mother, Olympias, in the form of a serpent. Philip was never his true father. Alexander is the son of a god. To a young man who always clashed with his father, this is welcome news. He walks out of the desert glowing, like Moses coming down from Sinai. Leaving Egypt, Alexander climbs back up into Palestine. Jewish tradition says he comes to Jerusalem, a great city lying in his path, and there the priests show him the book of Daniel. Daniel had been a prophet in Babylon in the reign of its last king, Belshazzar, in the very hour Cyrus took the city. Cyrus had diverted the Euphrates and marched his troops in along the dry riverbed, a surprise no wall could stop. Daniel had foretold the fall of Babylon, and the book spoke of a conqueror still to come, a Greek who will rule all of Asia. Alexander reads this and draws the obvious conclusion. He is that man. Once again, the prophets have announced his arrival before he came. About 2 years after Issus, Alexander turns inland for the reckoning. He follows the old road of Xenophon and the 10,000 until he reaches the Euphrates. Word comes that Darius has not been idle. He has raised yet another vast army, and this one brings elephants and 200-sided chariots, blades bolted to their axles, just like the ones Artaxerxes II had fielded at Cunaxa. Alexander waits marching south down the Euphrates, but chooses instead to press east to the Tigris and crosses it. There he learns that Darius has read his mind and come north to meet him. This time the Persian king means to pick the ground. He knows Alexander must come to him, that only a single great battle can decide the war. Darius chooses a vast open plain by the Tigris, near a town called Arbela. Its name is Gaugamela. The ending gamel means camel, so the word means something like the camel's stall. Here the Persian engineers perform their last great service for a king. They level every rough patch of the plain, smoothing the ground so the sized chariots and the massed cavalry can charge without obstacle. Alexander marches up and makes camp on a rise above the field, a proper camp, tents pitched, baggage near, every man fed a good dinner. Darius has blundered. His own camp lies miles away. He brings his army up the night before with nowhere to rest. No tents, no supplies, no support at their backs. And Darius makes it worse. Fearing a night attack, he forbids his men to sleep. Every soldier must stand at his post awake, waiting through the dark. History is repeating itself. At the Battle of Salamis in the autumn of 480 BC, a cunning message from Themistocles had lured Xerxes into sending his fleet into the straits, so the Persian rowers spent a whole night working and waiting for an attack that never came. Now Darius's men do the same, exhausting themselves for nothing. Because Alexander does nothing, he rides down onto the field by moonlight with a few generals, studies the ground, and goes back to sleep. He sleeps so soundly that he oversleeps, and his officers are afraid to wake him. So the last great battle between Greeks and Persians opens with the Macedonian king still asleep. They finally rouse him near mid-morning. He rises, studies the field, and deploys his army the way he always does, infantry solid in the center, cavalry on both wings. Across from him, Darius spreads his scythed chariots along the front, plants himself in a chariot at the center, and stacks his best troops on the wings to face the Macedonian horse. The day blazes without mercy, and the plain is a bowl of dust. The ancient accounts disagree so wildly that we must picture it. Clouds of grit, armies too huge to see from end to end. No one certain how the day truly unfolded. Still, a rough shape can be traced. Two of Darius's weapons prove worthless. First, the elephants. They had trudged all the way from India, through the Khyber Pass and across Iran, only to stand there as spectacle, a novelty for Macedonians who had never seen such beasts. Second, the scythed chariots, and this lesson should have been learned already at Cunaxa. A phalanx simply opens a lane as the chariots come on. Horses will not charge a solid wall of spears, nothing will make them, so the chariots pour into the gap, and the soldiers hurl javelins at the drivers, cut them down, even grab the reins and haul the vehicles to a stop. The weapons Darius had counted on come to nothing. The battle turns on a move Alexander makes again and again. He begins sliding to his right, drawing his cavalry away from the center. By the strict rules of Greek warfare, this is reckless. The wings are supposed to stay locked against the infantry. But it is his favorite gamble. By pulling his wing, the horn of the army, out to the side, he will either lure the enemy after him and tear their line open, or sweep around their flank. Darius answers, ordering his own left wing to chase and match him step for step, so the Persian flank cannot be turned. Alexander rides farther and farther still. until a vast gap yawns open between center and wings on both sides. Into that gap, the armies pour and collide. Meanwhile, on the far end, disaster threatens. Old Parmenio, commanding the Macedonian left as always, is buckling under the Persian right. It is the pattern of every Greek battle. Each side loads its best men on the right, so each right grinds down the enemy's weaker left, and the two ends of the line tell opposite stories. Here it means the Macedonian left is close to breaking, but Alexander, having peeled the Persian left clean off the army, wheels and cuts it apart, driving straight toward Darius at the center. Then a rider reaches him from Parmenio, roughly 70 years old, begging for help. Alexander turns and charges the whole length of the field, seeming to be in two places at once, and rescues the left. United again, the Macedonian army rolls forward and crushes everything before it. Once again, Darius flees. Once again, Alexander owns the field. Here at the camel's stall of Gaugamela, the long wars between Greeks and the Persians truly end. It is Alexander's greatest victory, and it drops into his hands not merely the lands between the Tigris and the Euphrates, but everything from where he stands to the distant Indus River. From here his road runs to the ends of the earth. He will march through the far Persian provinces, conquer them all, and then attempt the one thing his Macedonians least expect of him, to weld two enemy worlds into a single people. The victory is not just a battle won, it is an empire thrown open, and Alexander goes to claim it. The road from Gaugamela leads straight to the capital cities of Persia. We can even date the battle closely. It fell in the autumn of 331 BC, and about 10 days before it, the moon went dark in eclipse. The Egyptian soothsayers, now marching with Alexander, read that darkened moon as an omen in his favor, a sign that the heavens were with him. And so, with the sky itself seeming to bless him, the young king turns south into the beating heart of the empire he has just won. Babylon opens its gates without a fight. Alexander enters under a rain of flowers, the priest of Marduk singing hymns above the crowds, and the city receives him all at once as conqueror, as king, and as a god. From Babylon, he moves on to Susa, the empire's working capital, set on the old plain of Elam. Long ago, the heirs of Cyrus the Great had left their highland homeland of Persis and come down into Mesopotamia to rule the world from there, as conquerors had always done. At Susa, Alexander lays his hands on the vast royal treasury, the accumulated gold of the Persian kings. The wealth of an empire is now his to spend. Now Alexander turns towards the ceremonial cities that Cyrus and Darius had raised high on the plateau of ancient Persia, in the far south of modern Iran. And here something changes in him. Filled with reverence for these Persian kings who came before, he forbids his soldiers to loot, to plunder, to rape their ways through the land. This is no longer enemy country to be torn apart. It is his own kingdom now, and he demands it be treated with respect. The order lands badly. Many of his men had followed him for years, dreaming of exactly these spoils, and now the richest prize of all is placed off limits. At last he comes to Pasargadae, the place Cyrus had hoped his people would keep forever as the center of their power. Herodotus ends his whole history here, with a warning Cyrus gave his followers. Do not go down to live soft on the fertile plains like the Babylonians. Stay in the hard highland country, because hard lands breed hard men. In this quiet park-like place, Alexander seeks out the tomb of Cyrus, and he is astonished by what he finds. The man who conquered the world lies in a small plain house of stone, resting on a few simple steps. No gold, no colossus, just a modest little tomb for the greatest king the East had known. So the transformation comes to its quiet end. The man who bathed in the tent of Darius, who was named the son of Zeus in the burning desert, who was hailed as a living god beneath the flowers of Babylon, now stands in silence before a small house of stone. He is humbled by the memory of the one who built, long before him, the empire he has just taken. Between the tent of Darius and the tomb of Cyrus lie all the long wars of Greeks and Persians, and here at this modest grave they finally come to rest. But Alexander does not rest. A single restless ambition is already pulling him onward, toward the ends of the earth.